Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike McQueen. I'm so excited to be with Simon Kriss from Australia. Simon, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you, Mike. Appreciate being here.
All right. Well, Simon is bringing us a perspective that is from the business world and also from across the other side of the world, from Australia. So, Simon, can you kind of introduce yourself a little bit to us and give us a little background about what you are, especially with your connections with AI?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, Mike. So as you said, my name's Simon. I live in Melbourne in Australia. That's down south in Australia, where it is bitterly cold this time of year. And I run a one-person AI advisory, and I work with company boards. I work with C-suite executives, helping them understand what AI is, how they're going to use it, what the risks are, what they need to do about governance without overcooking it, all of those types of things, as well as a lot of just AI literacy in organizations. Everybody's talking about AI, but only half the people that are actually understand what it is and what it can do.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. And let's dive right into strategy. So you work with leaders of companies and organizations to organize their strategy, and that's something that a lot of libraries have in common, trying to help their community or their key stakeholders in their library organization to kind of update their strategic plans and like integrating them with AI. So tell us a little bit about how does that look in the corporate world in Australia and beyond, because I know you also travel all over the place. So what
I, I I do travel all over the place. You're right. If I'm not at home, I'm in a Qantas jet somewhere. In fact, I think I spend more time with them than I do at home. It's very interesting. We're seeing a stepped approach to strategy. So the very first thing, and I think it's mostly derived from past history of how we do business and what the vendors are telling us, is that most initial strategies are about exploiting AI. So, how do we shoehorn this technology into our existing business model to make us better, stronger, faster, cheaper? Choose an adjective.
Mhm.
That has some great results, and that can absolutely deliver. It's also though what causes scare around I'm going to lose my job and AI is coming for me and all that type of stuff.
Mm. Fear of missing
The
out.
sec- Fear of missing out, yeah, the FOMO, and to a certain degree, what I call FOMIF, fear of moving forward. Organizations just
Yeah.
getting locked down in fear of
Uh-huh.
moving forward because it's too big, too scary. So
Hmm.
that's kind of that side of it is the exploiting side. But then over time, organizations start to pivot their strategy to exploring AI. So that is, what can we do now that we couldn't do before? What new markets can we go after? What new services can we offer? What new things can we do that we simply couldn't do before?
Mm.
How do we leverage the wealth of data that we might have into a new area of business, potentially whole new revenue streams? And we're seeing organizations stand up completely new revenue streams based on what they're doing with AI.
Mm. And that takes a certain level of risk aversion and willingness to try techniques. What are some of the challenges that you see with companies that or organizations that maybe aren't that willing compared to ones that are like describe that contrast in.
Yeah, if
eh,
they're not that willing, they're going to fail. So there's a whole lot of statistics out there about 70% of AI projects fail to launch and all that sort of stuff.
mm,
Well, that's a broad sweeping statement because AI is not AI. Everybody thinks, oh, ChatGPT is AI, and it just isn't. That's one form of AI.
right, right.
So that's part of it. The other part of it is that if you're going to play with a brand new, highly transformative technology like AI, and particularly generative AI, then you have to have a tolerance for failure. And most organizations have an inbuilt no failure type rule, right? You would
Right,
have
right.
heard the phrase, pardon the English, cover your ass.
Yeah,
So, or in America, cover your ass. You've you've kind of, you don't want to be the one to step out. You don't want to be the one to make the mistake,
right.
because that's frowned upon. So the organizations I'm finding that are winning in this space, most of them are hiving off their AI activity into like an AI lab or an AI cell or something. And that group is allowed to fail. In fact, they're encouraged to fail because you learn more when you fail.
Mm.
So, you've got to take it though outside of the normal corporate hierarchy and the normal corporate reporting to give it the freedom to be able to fail. Not every
Hmm.
company is like SpaceX and everyone applauds when their rocket blows up. Most organizations are not like that. So, yeah, that tolerance for failure is really, really critical.
And how would you like, there's a lot of parallels with library organizations, all library types, like K through 12 school libraries, academic and or college libraries, and public librarians. And what do you see as far as the parallels about how they might be able to integrate or adapt AI into their strategy? And like, what would be the consequences for them if they don't?
Look, if they don't, if it's a school library, it's fine. The school's not going to shut down because the library didn't do AI, right? You're not going to have this competitive landscape that you might have in the corporate world to a certain degree.
But wait, let me argue that for a quick second though,
Yeah.
before you move on, because the concern I have with that is, I mean, library closings are out of control at throughout K-12 schools everywhere, and I am like the whole heart of what my book is trying to accomplish in this podcast is to embrace AI as librarians to be leaders with AI, so that to strengthen the future of libraries. So. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I kind of
No,
think
no.
that like some people like are they're not, I don't want to say naive, but they don't realize that they think that if this stuff doesn't apply to them in their school or their library, that it won't affect them if they don't follow that kind of mindset.
I,
So
Look, it will affect them. The point I was making, I guess, is that I won't see the school going out of business because the library doesn't adopt AI, but I can see the school becoming irrelevant
yeah,
because they
yeah,
don't.
it's a
And that
great
will
point.
ultimately lead to their demise.
Yeah.
If I am a parent, I'm looking for the latest and greatest school. I'm looking for the school most equipped to get my child ready to integrate into the workforce so
Which
that
is
they have
happening
that
right
great
now. I
right
mean,
now.
it's happening.
So,
Yeah.
so I don't want a school that says don't use AI and we don't use AI and you have to quote this and do that. And it's tough for a librarian, right? If you think about that job, the way I think about the job of a librarian is they are one of the most trusted advisors. You've kind of got your doctor, you've got researchers, and then you've got librarians. They have to be factually based and they have to know this incredible amount of it. I'd almost argue that librarians have more knowledge in their head than doctors do
Mm.
because it has to be so broad. They have to know all these books. They have to know, where things are. And it's an incredibly structured world. And so it's a tough transition, but it can be an amazingly powerful transition because, in a very similar way to libraries, AI works in patterns. The best thing you can do with AI is give it a piece of data and say, figure out the pattern. That's where AI excels. And there's very much pattern behavior in libraries too, right? Everything from the indexing system of how do I find a book down to how do we put which books do we put right at the front of the library because we know they're popular and there's all of these patterns. And AI can help with that. So I think if you're not using AI, you're going to rapidly become irrelevant. Kids are going to come in the door and they're going to look for a QR code that they can scan and they can chat with something to find out which book they should go to.
Mm.
And, in the past, that was a tougher thing to do. It kind of takes me back to, you know, an experience I had with a librarian when I was a little kid.
Wait. Yeah, that's perfect. Tell us, one of the questions I was going to ask you is a good memory of a library or librarian.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that's what, all right. Perfect. Thank you.
look, I struggled to read. Not that I couldn't read. I could read. I just couldn't get engaged by a book. I just
Mhm.
struggled to find something that engaged me.
Yeah, me too.
And my mother tried different things, different books, different things. And every time I'd get like 6 pages in and go, I'm bored with this. Like, I probably a short attention span is the problem. And my mum said to me, you should go and see the school librarian. So I went and saw the school librarian thinking this is going to be the most boring conversation of my life. I must have only been, I was a precocious little 8-year-old or something. And I spent a bit of time, and she, rather than telling me what I should do, stopped and asked a whole lot of questions. A whole lot of questions.
Mm,
And in the end, she said, look, would you just read one chapter of a book for me? And it's by a lady author, but I think you're really going to like it. And that author was Enid Blyton, and the
okay.
book was The Magic Faraway Tree.
Okay.
And I absolutely fell in love with Enid Blyton books and wound up reading them all. And it kind of structured out later in life, helping me understand whether or not I'm really going to enjoy a book. Because I have a pile of books next to my bed. Some I just chew through like, 2, 3 minutes type thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, 2, 3 days. Other books sit there for months because I read a chapter at a time and I just really struggled with it.
Yeah.
And it's helped me be able to identify. And now I use I use books as a reward system.
Okay. Oh,
It's kind of
that's
stupid.
no,
I'll
that's
start into a heavy book and I'll read 1 or 2 chapters and think, oh man, that's really heavy. And I'll pick up another book that I know I'm going to enjoy and I'll devour chapters and then go back and do a bit more work. And it's kind of a work and reward scheme to get through books for me.
the ones that are hard. But see, there's something compelling you to read the books that are hard. You could choose not to read it, but so that there's an inner desire that you have to want to read it, and using
Yep.
techniques like that for rewards to, like because most people would be like, well, why are you reading it if you don't want to? But you probably just want to. So, oh, that's a
Yeah.
great. Thanks for sharing that story. Let's talk about before we move on from the last topic. Could you touch a tiny bit more about strategy for maybe that would relate to public libraries? Because public libraries, I think most of them have a board of trustees that volunteer to help coordinate the direction and vision of the library, and they often have to update a strategic plan. It's a plan for the whole goal and vision about what their library is going to have to do in the upcoming year or two, or I don't know how they're all a little different, I think, with how they structure that. But what advice would you give a librarian that is about to try to convince their board to adapt their vision and their strategic plan to integrate AI?
Yeah. Look, the number one piece of advice, and it's the same in the corporate world, is if the board members don't deeply understand AI, you're never going to get there
Mm,
because, AI can be a little bit like fine wine. Everybody knows about it, everybody loves the taste, but if you try and engage people in a discussion about tannin structure and length of pellet and fruit forwardness, everybody just reels back and says, hey, I just
right,
want a drink.
right.
And it's the same with AI. People will say, "Oh, artificial intelligence. Yes, yes, I know about that. I used ChatGPT once. It didn't give me the right answer, so I can't see how it
Yeah,
would work for us."
right.
And you get that type of stuff, and we see this. Like I've seen this from the chair of the board down. People just do not understand it. So the very first thing, the best thing you can do is the convincing you need to do is convince your board to immerse themselves in AI a little.
Mm,
Bring somebody in if you have to and do a 4 hour workshop. Let them get right down. Somebody who can talk about what is AI, what are the risks, and how do we manage them? Not there's uncontrolled risks that we'll never deal with. All
right,
of the
right.
risks of AI can be dealt with. What are the concerns? How do we make sure that we're governing this stuff properly? Blah blah blah. Right, and let them get a little
Hmm.
bit hands on. Let them get their hands dirty. One of the things I love to do with boards, and it's particularly good if they're public companies or local governments and things like that, is get the last 12 months worth of council or board minutes
Mm,
and pop them into a bot, and then in front of them say, when was the last time you guys talked about dogs? Oh, you don't know?
yeah.
Well, it was August 12th, and here's what you said.
Yeah, right, right.
And they kind of go, oh, holy crap, I can recall, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah. You can
make it
process large
really
volume.
make it really practical and pragmatic for them.
Hmm.
Then once you've got a board that's active in AI, as I call it, once they've kind of tuned into it, then the discussion is a whole lot better. The discussion is, and usually starts with, where are the big pain points in the library, and
Mm,
how can we solve for those pain points? So once again, the exploiting first.
hmm.
Because once they get their head around exploiting, then you can start to take them on the journey of possibly exploring AI.
Mm. And I think things just change so fast, and generative AI in the world of library land has really, really exploded in the last year or so. I mean, it's
Mm.
unbelievable. So, at least in the US, and I mean, I know there's like pockets of areas, of course, but it's incredible of how popular the topic is. But just because it's popular doesn't mean that organizations are knowing what to do about it. And the stuff that you
They
just
mostly
suggested,
don't.
yeah,
They
yeah.
mosely don't.
Because yeah, you're right.
I
Because I
mean,
mean,
AI's
who doesn't?
AI's
Yeah,
been around since 1956, right? John
right.
McCarthy, Dartmouth University came up with the term. But in reality, it's only been really employed since the 1970s into 1980s. We're doing machine learning. Into the 1990s, the more narrow traditional AI came about. And although generative has been around for 5 or 6 years, we all kind of came to explore it when ChatGPT launched to the world and the world collectively lost its mind.
Yeah.
So, but now and there's a lot of, because it's wild, wild west, there's very little regulation across the
Hmm.
entire world. There's very little regulation. Vendors in particular can get away with whatever they want. And
Mm,
so the marketing hype that is coming out around terms like cognitive AI, which is, reasoning models, and then agentic AI that actually isn't agentic at all. It's AI agents, but
right.
agentic sounds like a better marketing. There's all this
Yeah.
marketing that's out there.
Right. Right.
And so it's cutting through all of that. I think AI presents a unique problem for librarians. And that unique problem comes in the form of, how do you know which books are quality produced books? So, what I mean by that is, Amazon a couple of months ago put a rule in place that said you cannot publish more than 7 books a day. A day. So, people were clearly using generative AI to write books, another tool like Canva or something to design a cover, slapping them together and throwing them onto Amazon. And
Right.
all of that synthetic stuff is starting to make its way through. And somehow the librarians now have to gatekeep which books are actually in the library. In the past, I would think that was a lot easier. Most of the books came from known publishers. There was a minimum level of editorial quality, blah, 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 blah. That's not the case right now. And
Right.
they're kind of getting, yes, we all see fake videos and fake photos and all that sort of stuff. People with 3 arms and 6 fingers, that's fine. But it's harder in a book.
Right.
And so I think there's some really unique challenges, and I think the role of the librarian is going to change a little, as the role of a solicitor and everybody else is changing because of AI.
Right.
Away from being that person that indexes the books, understands the books, to being more of a quality gateway. So moving from a maker to a checker, for want of a better term.
Right. Right.
And I think that'll be important.
Well, one of the big transitions that the world of librarianship has made was a handful of years ago with information literacy. Like, the focus on books is just actually a really small component to the industry of a librarian
Mm.
because it's been so much more about like learning how to evaluate information, how to process, how to different forms of literacy besides text too, like video and audio and all that. And now with like you touched on the point that I write a lot about in my book is the inability to distinguish human content from AI content, and that includes all modalities. I mean, images
Yep.
and audio and video now are the quality is indistinguishable from AI generated content is just you can't tell the difference. So it just brings apart these new set of skills that are needed to evaluate information based off of other factors. And the heart of
Correct.
what we do too is when integrating or assessing AI generate content or possible content is to about the verification process and double, like proving the information that you're getting is accurate, like with multiple sources and
Accurate, valid,
valid. Yeah.
um, and not synthetic.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's tricky too because I mean, that's arguable. I think it's becoming more and more arguable because sometimes AI generated, like if you think about just images alone, um, some of the AI generated images are pretty, even though they're synthetic, they're pretty amazing, and can be pretty useful. And for someone that isn't, if you can't hire a graphic designer and you have to, you want to just have something designed yourself, like it can be very effective. I don't want to get off task too much here, but I talked recently about this concept of hypocritical. I think we're all kind of hypocritical in certain aspects, as in like when we're offended by generative AI in something that we're passionate or close to, it's more likely that we'll be offended if it's generating something that we're passionate about. But if it's
Yep.
outside of what our passion or world is, we're less likely to be bothered by it. So graphic
Yep.
designers are just like their world's upside down and they're super offended by it. But they might not be as offended about it by having AI write ChatGPT write a email to someone for them. Whereas like a writer or a teacher might be like, no, you shouldn't be letting it write that email. I don't know.
Yeah. Look,
It's not.
I think there's still a perception out there that AI is cheating, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
and it's the same path that the poor humble calculator went down.
yep,
About I remember a time that Mike, you're probably of a similar ilk where you weren't allowed to take a calculator into an exam room because,
yeah,
quote, you won't have a calculator in your pocket every day. Well, all of us have a calculator in our pocket every
right.
day.
Hmm.
And none of us now, when we write a report, would put in the cover, all calculations in this report were done using a calculator. We just wouldn't write that, right? Or we wouldn't put all calculations were done using Excel. And
Right,
yet, because of this new technology, we find people saying, well, transparency, you need to write part of this paper was written using AI. And
hmm
this is often an ethical problem. Is if ethically that's what you want to do, what happens if you're an accountant, a librarian, and you write a report that somebody's paying for, and you say 40% of this report was written by AI? The natural response is people say, well, then I want a discount on the price because you didn't do
right,
it. AI did it. I could have done it
right,
myself. So
right.
it's this AI is cheating thing
Yeah, yeah,
rather than getting to a point of maturity where we recognize it's not the calculator, it's the person using the calculator that knows
Right.
what that calculation is. And it's the same with AI. Is it the AI or is it the person that knows how to write the right prompts and give it the right information to do the right thing? So we're
Right.
still in
Right.
that early stage. It's cheating.
Well, and it's amazing because it evolves so fast, and we're just today I've finished writing a big section about a lot of library organizations that have created their own like AI guidelines or roadmaps on how their community should adopt AI into their lives, and there's an overwhelming pattern or theme of learning how to partner with AI and, not it's human centered, like human first, but like it's a specific strategy of that we're going to be teaching and embracing is how do we partner with different AI tools and systems, and
Hmm.
that just opens up such a gray area because if I'm now suddenly interacting and asking questions and getting answers and doing research and then getting suggestions and crafting what I write and getting input on it and have it change a little bit and then like suddenly now because it's suggesting how it's changing uh, is it completely mine anymore? And then what about like, oh yeah, I forgot I mentioned a couple points that I should have included too. So now I'm adding that. And like, is
Has
that,
that now changed the thrust
yeah,
of the book because
yeah,
of that? Yeah, look,
yeah.
it's a
And
domino,
that's
it's the domino
everything.
effect, right?
Right,
With,
right.
did you tip over that domino and therefore this happened? Or did
Hmm.
you, and ultimately it's going to be a bit of an esoteric discussion, but it's absolutely valid. You're right. Is this, I mean, the technology is transformative enough and unfortunately, in some ways, authoritative enough that when it comes back with an idea, it sounds very authoritative. And so
Mm.
you tend to
Hmm.
weight that idea more
Hmm.
heavily
Yeah.
than just your mate saying, "Hey, you know what? You should write about how the color of the library doors." Right? And you go, "Shut up."
Yeah,
But
right.
ChatGPT says it and you go, "Oh, maybe I should write about the
That's
color
so
of the
funny.
library door."
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
and it's
I don't know
really
what that's called, but
authoritative.
yeah. And that makes me think of how naive so many kids are with the information that they get. I mean, librarians have like since the internet came out, all we've been preaching about is don't just click and read the first thing that pops up when you search something in Google, like just because, that's what's presented in front of you doesn't mean that's what you even want or if it's accurate or not. And so now
Yep.
when you multiply that concern with AI, it's just, I guess the point is that so often people try to find a concrete black and white answer to address like what's okay and what's not, and unfortunately, it's just not going to be quite so simple. We have to be able to, move forward with that uncertainty of without clear, concrete like answers to stuff about how
But
it's. I
see,
don't know.
all of this presents a unique opportunity for the librarians.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, there's a couple of parts of a business or a school that are going to win if they lean in the right way. So
Right.
in a big organization, the people who are going to win are the internal auditors, those people that hold the business to account. Those
Mm,
people that check and know that everything is okay, those teams are going to quadruple in size because if
mm,
you're using AI to generate code, well, you need somebody that understands what good code is to look at it and tell you if that's good code.
hmm.
So that type of thing. From the librarian's perspective, the mass of synthetic and trash that is being pushed out, particularly on social media channels,
Hmm.
is ultimately, I believe, going to be the demise of those same channels. People will
Hmm.
start to just get so like how many things on LinkedIn do you look at and they're written by AI? There's
Hmm.
too many emojis. There's the M dash. They start with imagine a world where you can pick it, right?
Right.
And so people, I think, are going to be driven back to more more human content.
Yep.
So
Personalized.
more and more we're going to want to sit together and talk together. So I
Yeah.
think cafes and things are going to win. And I think people are going to come back to real books written by real people. You know, some of those classics, Mark Twain will always be Mark Twain. You know, and so I think there's actually an opportunity there for librarians to kind of leverage on that side and say, here's a chance to step out of that, you know, unrealistic plastic world that's out there and step into a world based, you know, on human history and human
Hmm.
endeavor.
Well, you're kind of touching on one of the questions I was going to ask you, relating to like what are the blessings or the wonders and wonderful part of AI. I mean, I have one chapter that's addressing the blessings of AI and one chapter addressing the burdens. And throughout society, so many people are concerned about problems, and I think that's talked about a lot more than the I don't know if that's true. I was going to say talked
Yep,
about more than the positive things, but I just
that's
don't
true.
know if there's a handful of things that are recurring themes, and I think if I know you well enough, you probably are familiar with some of the recurring positive themes, but that AI is bringing to the world. But if you could pick of all those things, what are some things that you think are like standing out about the positive parts of AI
The positive parts of AI, particularly in the library scene,
or whatever or
is the
whatever
ability
anywhere?
yeah, is the ability to view data from a whole pile of different angles at a speed that a human just couldn't do
Hmm.
or could do, but it would take a really long time.
Hmm.
You know, being able to super speed deep research and stuff is fine, but it's more things that are slightly obtuse. So today you go into the library and you're searching for a hard data fact to primarily, right? So I'm looking for a John Grisham book, or I'm looking for a book on cardiothoracic surgery, or I'm looking for that type of thing. But more and more as humans, we have rather obtuse questions. So I walk in and say to the librarian, look, I've just undergone cardiothoracic surgery and now I'm getting cancer treatment and I'm not feeling great about the world. And I'd really like a book that will be uplifting and positive and help me see the positive potential in life. Now, unless the librarian has read every single one of those books and can, you know, recall them, it's going to be quite the but AI just takes that entire data set, and because it's read the contents of the book, not just the back cover, it can say, well, actually, there's this book and this book and this book. This one's great about post surgery, but this one's got some really uplifting messages. And if I then blend in how often these books have been hired out, and any feedback mechanism that we have on these books, and this book is the biggest selling one on, on McGraw Hill's list or whatever, then it can start to make a recommendation that comes from a quite obtuse place.
Mm.
So I think that's one of the big benefits. But look, generally all over, the big benefit of AI is taking away the mundane stuff that fills our day and doesn't let us add value, right? If you say to anybody that's working today, do you have spare time in your day?
Right,
Nobody ever says yes, right?
right,
Everybody's
right,
days are full. These days, you're either busy or you're unemployed.
right, right.
So, so it takes away that cannon fodder stuff, that stuff that takes up our time but doesn't truly add value. So if you think about, I love that every month people sit in front of their PC for 4 or 5 hours creating a 20 slide deck of what happened last month, which is oddly enough copy and paste of the month before. And, all of those decks get rolled up to somebody who ultimately doesn't read them. Why are we doing that? Why don't we have generative AI collect all of that data, analyze the data, write about it, and present it to the human at a 90% completed? and then the human adds in the value because
Mm,
there's things that AI doesn't know. AI doesn't know that the CFO of that company just put in his resignation and he's going to be announcing it formally, and that's going to change our relationship with it. AI doesn't know that.
right.
AI doesn't know that the CEO's son just won their football championship. And so that's something that you can tie into the report to make it more personalized.
Mm, hmm.
Kids, there's so many benefits for kids. Kids with learning disabilities. Imagine a kid that is struggles to learn, but really loves stories that feature Batman. Well, we could have a book read to that child in the voice of Batman.
Yeah.
We could give them their reports and their homework as a bat styled activity. You know,
Hmm.
the marketers have talked about it for many, many, many years, and we've never been able to do it until now, is true mass personalization.
Hmm.
Absolutely personalized. Like, I do it with my grandkids. I have AI write them bedtime stories that
Hmm.
are personalized to them. You
Right.
know, they're the
Right.
star of the story. Their little dog Pongo is with them, and you know their brother or sister, maybe depending on if they're fighting with their brother or sister, is in the story. This one wants it set in the land of unicorns, and this one wants it set in the land of motorbikes.
Hmm.
And it's mass personalization like we've never seen.
Yeah, I did a a big project. Actually, it wasn't a big project. It was a really short and simple project with students where we created an interactive puppet show. You know, they as a group they each picked we have a whole bunch of these puppets and they each picked one that they liked. And then a lot of them had a lot of specific needs, special needs, and they were able to, like customize. We were able to create a one group story, and each student was able to like create with the help of AI create their character and then put it all together in a
Mm,
story that then they we printed off hard copies and copies in Braille. I work at a school that has students with visual impairments, so
yep.
they were able to then like practice their Braille skills and their reading skills. And their speaking skills, because when it was their turn to do their part or whatever,
Yep.
they were really, really bought into it because they
Of
felt like they
course.
helped create it. It's
Yep.
personalized, kind of like what you're saying. And I
Yep.
just feel like those opportunities we're just beginning to scratch the surface about all the
Ah,
great possibilities that are
and
around.
it's huge. You know, I know some people that have neurodivergent children,
Hmm.
and they're often looking for books that use neuro-affirming language.
Mm,
And they're hard to find
right,
unless you have a big, hairy, audacious AI system that can troll through 300,000 books in a couple of seconds and say,
right,
this book over here uses really
yeah,
neuro-affirming language. And so the
right,
parent can go and get that. Like, that's just like I said, another one of those obtuse things that AI just empowers us to do.
yeah.
Yes, a librarian could find the answer to that. They absolutely could. It might take them a few hours, a couple of days, but they could find it. But is that the best use of their time?
Mm,
Probably not.
right, right. Well, and um, yeah, there's just so many possibilities that are yet to be even discovered as we keep emerging through new
Mm.
things. Um, all right, last question here. Let's say, actually, two questions. What advice would you give to a new librarian or someone that's just aspiring to like become a librarian that relates to AI?
Uh, develop a tolerance for humans, um, because they can be really, really frustrating. But it would be the same as a new anything. Immerse yourself in AI and figure out what it can do for you. And don't worry about, do I know enough? Have I learnt enough? I'm not technical. I'm an AI advisor and I struggle to connect my email. You don't have to be technical. And it's okay to not, go straight from nothing to a PhD in applied mathematics You
Mm,
you learn as you go. As you start using it, then more use case, like use begets use with AI.
mm.
As you start to understand the power of what it can do. So I would, rather than shying away, you need to really lean into AI.
Okay, that's great advice. Thank you. All right, last question. Are you actually it's a two-part question. Tell us about your experience in the United Nations
Oh yeah.
when you spoke of tell us about that, and then I'll give you the second part of the question after that. So what
So
tell us what that was.
I was very blessed to be asked to and honored to be asked to be one of just 600 people out of 3,000 odd that applied to attend a conference at the UN office in Geneva in January. And it was run by a group called AI for Developing Nations. And I was asked to be a senior fellow and go and speak at this event. And
A global
because
event.
a global event, absolutely global event. And because there were so many speakers, there was 158 speakers across 2 days. Everybody only got 6 minutes, so it was half a TED talk. So you needed to be able to very quickly, very clearly articulate your message and get that message across.
Okay.
And this is some of the world's leading minds around AI talking about so many things. There was a side discussion about will AI become sentient that quickly degraded into, but what does sentient truly mean? There were discussions around federated learning, which is a very big thing in the medical field, but also in the library field. And how do you do cross-border federated learning? You've got
Mm,
60 hospitals in 40 countries. How do
mm,
you do that and maintain sovereignty? And there are a whole pile of things that are impacting, a whole lot of discussion around will the developing nations fall behind or will they
mm,
use what they've got to leapfrog the developed nations, having learnt from our mistakes and things like that?
mm. And what did you
My
speak about?
and I have to say, just before I answer that, I'm sitting in a room, 600 people, listening to these speakers and thinking, am I the dumbest person in this room? Because I definitely felt like imposter syndrome went through the roof, as
Yeah.
it always does,
Yeah.
when you're in such a prestigious building with such amazing people. The topic that I spoke about is the concept of digital trash. And that is the developed world is very good at offshoring their problems. Oh, too much plastic? We'll send it to a developing country.
Mm,
End of life tires? We'll just cut them up and send them to
mm,
another country. We've been doing it for years. Um, you might almost say we didn't get rid of slavery, we just offshored it. And so these people in developing nations are doing this work. And unfortunately, when AI impacts work and jobs, the jobs that it impacts are those that are highly repetitive, low value, transactional in nature. And most of those jobs are offshored. They're in low
mm,
cost locations,
mm.
call centers, legal secretaries, medical transcriptions, they're all been offshored. And so the job impact, the job loss impact is going to be felt more heavily in the developing nations
Mm,
than it will in the developed nations. And in fact, the new jobs that AI is creating, chief AI officer, big data, blah, 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 they're being created here. They're not being created there.
yeah.
So you've got a whole pile of people that are being impacted and a government that may not have the money to be able to get the universities to completely change their training curriculum to, be able to empower these people to
Mm,
have a role going forward in
mm,
AI. The
mm.
US, Australia, the UK, Europe have all thrown hundreds of millions of dollars at AI education. Brazil, Honduras, South Africa, Philippines can't afford to do that.
Mm.
So we are getting this greater inequality between the digital divide is getting bigger and
Yeah,
bigger.
yeah, yeah.
And so that's what I was talking about was this concept of digital
Mm.
trash.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. Thanks for bringing that attention. I mean, my whole career has been serving underserved communities, and the digital divide is a big topic in the library community. About it has
Mm,
been for many years, especially internet access, but now, and the other half to it is also just the training and the educational part to it. So you have
yep.
high impact communities that are underserved, historically underserved, that now, with the advent of affordable smartphones and internet hotspots, and the improvements are coming, but the gap that's, I think, that is not closing enough is the information educational piece to it, and that compound that with what you said um, about developing countries and their
Mm,
loss of jobs on top of it. And if that's not enough, AI is also threatening white collar jobs too. That's the latest
of
talk,
course.
is that there's not going to be any, some of the most resistant jobs are, like hands-on, but that's also being threatened with advancements with robotics too. So there's this no doubting that our world is changing in the world of work and the impact that's going to have, which is all the more need to like be able to learn more and stay positive. I feel like there's such a desperate
Look,
need.
it is going to take some jobs, but we've seen this before.
Yeah, right.
Years ago there were 100 farmers, 100 workers in the field, and they had a pick and they were plowing the ground by hand. And the only jobs that existed outside of that was the wood turner that made the handles and the blacksmith that made the little blades. And then we discovered that a horse can pull a plow. So now we only needed 10 people in the field, but we needed farriers, we needed people to make the leather straps for the horses, we needed people to breed more horses, we needed people to work in a foundry to make enough steel to make the plows. And then we invented a tractor. Now you only need one person in the field, but we need people to make pneumatic tires, diesel mechanics, plastics manufacturing. So we've seen this before.
Yeah,
Did the
yeah.
term SEO and SEM ever exist before 1970? No, because we didn't have the internet. So,
Right, right,
unfortunately for them, they're borderline about to go again. But it's we've seen this stuff before.
right,
And
right.
wouldn't it be lovely, just as a final thought, wouldn't it be lovely if we could get AI literacy increased across the entire countries and maybe public libraries have a role to play in developing out almost personalized AI training that is done by an AI
Yeah,
bot or something. But
yeah, yeah.
imagine that we get to a world where AI is doing so much of the grunt work that all of us only work 3 days a week or four
Right.
days a week.
Yeah,
Same pay, but we only work 3 or 4 days a week. And we have 4 days, off rather than 5 and 2.
right.
Let's spin that around a little bit. That'd be a lovely place to be in. A bit Nirvana-ish, but it would be a nice place to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk of that coming. That's coming. I wrote about that too in my book, a couple different things about it. But okay, last question, last second part of the last question. How do people contact you? Do you ever come to the United States? And how do they, what services do you offer? Like, how do we find you?
Come
What
to
do you
the
offer?
Come to the United States. Yes, I
Like
do come to
what?
the United States.
Who would want to do
And
that when you live in Australia?
yeah, I'm probably there once or twice a year. Look, the best
Okay,
way to find me is on LinkedIn.
okay.
The name is fairly unique. I'm one of the only Simon Chris's out there, and definitely the only one in AI. Or they can go to simonchris.ai, my website,
Yep.
and find me there. And always happy to have a chat with someone about AI.
Oh, Simon, it was wonderful talking with you. Thanks for taking time to chat, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thanks, Mike. It's been awesome.